All right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started then. All right. So without further ado, so normally when we start these, we get really into the person's background because this is sort of like a it's your life kind of presentation. I feel like Oprah and like, tell me a little bit about you as a child and all this stuff. But I'm not going to make Liz get too far into her history because there's just so much that we want to learn about what she's doing with Nearshore. So we're going to touch a little bit on it, but this one's going to feel a little bit different than our normal behind the scenes does. Before I introduce Liz, let me tell you a little bit about Nearshore. Nearshore is about building supply chains closer to home. It's an AI-enabled marketplace of 3,300 of the best factories across the US, Latin America, and the EU. And then Liz is the founder, co-founder, I believe. She can tell us a little bit more, but she has over 20 years of experience helping brands from startups to global brands, and Liz knows exactly how to navigate global manufacturing and how to turn ideas into market-ready products. And so tonight, we're gonna kind of tap into her expertise, and we're gonna learn a little bit more about what is offered at Nearshore, and get some of your questions answered at the end. So save your questions because we're gonna do a Q&A at the end. But I'm going to start by asking the questions going, forward that I think all of you probably want to know. So hopefully we get through all the things that maybe you were curious about and why you joined today. So first, let's give Liz a round of applause for joining us today. Thank you so much, Liz, for coming. And she's coming from the East Coast, so it's really late over there. So we really, really appreciate the fact that it's 9 o'clock and you're willing to do this with us. Oh, and you're on mute, Liz. There you go.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I actually recognize a few friendly faces from some of the Q&As we've done at Nearshore, so that's fun.
That's great. I'm so glad.
Thank you. Yeah. Can I dive in and just kind of get going?
Yes. Actually, my first question is, what is Nearshore? So if you want to just quickly give us an overview.
Well, and before I even dive into that, I just want to kind of give some structure and orientation to the discussion, because what I like to do, I talk to brands a lot, and I've been kind of consulting. I've helped launch hundreds of lines, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but I've answered a lot of questions over the years. So I find these spaces are like the most productive and enjoyable for you if we have a lot of back and forth and you use this time just to get some intel, right? So we'll definitely have a Q&A, but if as you're going, you want to pop questions into the chat, I'll take a look and we can kind of weave them into the conversation as well. So just to kind of have you understand how that will work. And then if there's anything, sometimes, I don't know, if there's anything that comes up afterward, I'll make sure you have my email. I'm really available to answer stuff. So I try to be helpful in that way. So feel free to follow up afterward. So just kind of to get us started. So Nearshore is a sourcing platform in its kind of simplest form. So brands come on, startups, we also have brands that you recognize the names of. They come on and they're looking for contract manufacturers. They're looking for factory partners. They're looking for factory partners to do their sewing, their assembly, whatever their product is, but they're also looking for materials, trims. They might be looking for technical designers. They might be looking for packaging. We even have fulfillment, everything that it really takes to get a product made, you'll be able to come on and find those partners. Our specific focus is on kind of the Western Hemisphere and Europe, this part of the world. There has been a lot of emphasis in the past 20 years. So when I first started, Alibaba was it wasn't really a thing. It wasn't easy to just go out and find suppliers. So I've kind of seen that whole arc, right? And while it has become much easier over time and there is a lot more platforms, there was not a nearshoring database, so to speak, and there was certainly not a focus on opening up Latin America. So Latin America in kind of a sourcing sense, finding factories there, working with materials there, felt a little like China 10 years ago, right? Where factories just weren't online as much. The ones who were really great were dealing with Disney and Adidas and big companies, but they weren't necessarily opening themselves up to grow through working with smaller and less established brands, which is the way that you kind of build out those ecosystems. So I was really excited. I have two other co-founders. I was really excited to put this together to kind of open up and really knit together the Americas. That's kind of like the vision in my mind. Think about the whole Americas, from the tippy bottom up to Canada, and how to kind of knit the supply chains together and give you, as you're sourcing, access to every supplier possible so that you can make the best choice for your sourcing. So that's kind of what we have done. And I know a couple of you have used the platform so far, because I see some familiar names. We launched 8 weeks ago. We've added 2,000 brands, which is like kind of crazy to me. In a very short amount of time, we have 4,000 factories now. So that has been really just kind of surging forward. We are building kind of in real time. So those of you who have used it, and I'll give everyone who's on the call a free account after this, but for those of you who have used it, like you'll see, right? We're building it in kind of its basic form. You can come on now, you can access factory search, you can submit an RFQ, and I'll like show you what that looks like in a bit. But you can do the basic things, but we are building a lot behind the scenes. It will really be a complete kind of supply chain planner. You'll be able to do a lot more, and you'll also be able at some point to kind of score your suppliers, right? So you'll be able to see kind of their distance from you and other criteria that you care about, so that as you're making global sourcing decisions, you have some sort of weighted kind of measure and metric about the choices that you're making. So that's really exciting, and we're building a lot. So kind of stay tuned is my big picture there. Do you want me to get a little into kind of my background, Angela?
Yeah, actually, that was going to be my second question, was just tell us about yourself and why and how you created this. What was your history of that led to this?
And I've been lucky. I think probably for a lot of you listening, you've probably done different things with your career. I'm assuming that's like the normal way to go about it. I have been in this world since I'm 42, almost 42, since I was 21 or 22, and I haven't really done anything else. So it's like what I know. I started out with a brand, just like a lot of people on this call. We had a reusable shopping bag brand, and they didn't really exist at that point. So we produced them for very large companies, and there just wasn't a lot of other options for companies like put their logo on those bags. They're very ubiquitous now, right? You see them everywhere, but there was a time when you just couldn't get them made. And so we were one of the only producers who was kind of Googleable in the US. And so through that process, because it's like a high volume product, right? It's not like a complicated fashion item. Bags are relatively simple, although we launched more complicated ones as we went. But they were high volumes, producing hundreds of thousands of units at a time. So with that comes a lot of pressure. I was quite young at the time. I didn't know what I was doing. We were producing overseas and different countries. And so I kind of learned the hard way about different things. And I had some factory owners really take me under their wing, overseas factory owners. And so that really led me to kind of amass a body of knowledge just through my own experiences that people then started asking me to share. And I started doing classes, and they just kind of became really successful. Like thousands of people would sign up. And at that point, there were a lot more options on the market for bags. We were not the only game in town anymore. So it was a very natural transition for me to kind of move into more of this kind of consultative role. And what that looked like was launching a product accelerator. So we launched a product accelerator about 10 years ago and put really hundreds of brands through that and thousands of products within those brands, and helped get them off the ground. So as you're thinking about your questions tonight, right, yes, we'll talk about manufacturing and nearshoring, but really nothing's off limits, right? I've kind of seen it all, costing and launch stuff and marketing and e-commerce and just all of it, right? I've had experience with it. And one of the reasons Nearshore was such a natural fit is because the network I had developed, right? It was a pretty global network of everyone you needed to know across many product categories, right? Apparel is one, but we have a lot of different categories on Nearshore, and I have worked with a lot of different categories. So that network was very valuable, and we kind of parlayed some of that into the platform. So that's my journey.
Wow, that's amazing. I love this. We have some similarities, and this is all I know how to do too. All I've ever done. It's just be in this industry. All right, so I kind of want to talk a little bit more detail, and what somebody might encounter and what's available. So my next question was, are there any factories in your network that are in the US? It doesn't have to be just nearshore or offshore. Are there some that are domestic? And of those, if there are there any that have the lower minimums so that somebody who's just getting started, doesn't have to make so many, that, they'll do smaller batches for them?
Yeah, and I'll kind of one up you on that with what we can do with that particular desire for small batch. So we have about half of the factories on the platform are US based factories or suppliers. There are tons of low or no minimum suppliers. So if you do submit an RFQ through the platform, which is free, and you email me your RFQ, I might even be able to give you a few suggestions, like just off the top of my head, depending on what you're making, because I know the factories pretty well. So just know that that's available afterward. You can kind of shortcut it. But yes, we have lots of low and no minimum order factories.
Amazing. Okay. And then for those that are going to be working with people that are over the border, what are some of the ways to sort of avoid the tariffs or lessen them? Because we all know so much of that is really why people are looking for onshore factories right now. But you can't always make everything onshore. And sometimes, as you grow and it makes more sense to actually make more someplace else, then, it's something you have to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that you can do. So Latin America was not hit as hard as some of the other countries and penalized with tariffs, right? There are places in Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, right, where you might have a lesser burden and do a lot of sewing, things like that. So there are pockets. There's also what we call free trade zones. You can, when you come on and do a factory search on our site, you can kind of search that. So you can see if there's any sewing factories that are in a free trade zone, which means you just don't have the tariff burden. And any materials you import in are also not hit with tariffs. So that can be really helpful. They tend to be larger minimum places, but it's always worth looking. The other thing is there are also small batch kind of low to no minimum factories in Peru and Colombia and in Mexico and different places. So I would just start a conversation with them and say, for my product category, I'm making dresses, I'm making shirts, whatever it is, like ask them about the tariffs. They'll know, right? This is what they do. And then you can compare and just see if the cost savings of working there, makes sense.
Great. And when you say lower minimums, can you give me an average of what you think that might be just on it? I know that there's some that have no minimums, but like an average, you'd think.
For me, we count small batch under 250, and I think of a low minimum as like 1 to 150 if they're kind of lower. Obviously, some go down, 25 and 50, but at like 25, you may as well just be zero. The cost doesn't really change that much. The cost really doesn't change till about 100 in a meaningful way. My advice would be, if it's a place that does 250, is to go in and try to just get some like extra sizes, or say, can I split it between 2 styles, or, still meet the 250, but get some more variety. That's always what you want to do with negotiating minimums is angle for variety, right? If you have to meet the minimum, fine, but at least you'll get some more styles to like offer your customer, which can be a big challenge when you're small, because you're like launching this whole line and you have like one item in 2 colors, and that can feel a little bit thin. So it's really in your benefit to kind of negotiate for more variety.
So you're saying that on average, if there are quite a few that have 250 as their minimums, that would include the different sizes and different colors.
Well, for every factory, it's very different, but you can use that as a point of leverage, right? If they say, oh, it's, 150 pieces per style, you can go in and say, listen, I want to order 5 styles. I'll do 50 of each. That's, like you can give them that kind of counter offer for sure.
When you're saying style, you're saying style as the actual garment or the color, the SKU?
Both. It could be the actual garment. For some of you who just have like one signature piece that you're launching, get in there and ask for different colorways, like whatever variety is meaningful to you. But that's certainly something some of them will be happy to do, or at least open to.
Does it help if somebody approaches, let's just say a sewing contractor with all of their cuts? Will they lower their minimum, the ones, that you're working with, because they don't have to do any of the development and they don't have to grade the patterns and do the markers and, all of that? If you walked in with cuts, and, you think that's a great way to negotiate?
I think that's a great way to negotiate. So one of the biggest things we hear from factories on our platform is like, I don't want to deal with all the inquiries that take too much of my time, right? So you knowing that going in as a brand and being really low maintenance, yes, is going to help your negotiating. And so let's actually talk about what that means, because it's a few key things. It's either telling them that you have everything designed and all your I's dotted and T's crossed because you've been working with Angela, and telling them that in like one sentence. Don't go on a big paragraph about it. Just make sure it's clear that they know everything's organized, material sourced, design done, organized. Or if that's not totally done, make it clear right up front that you understand that that's a service that you would pay for, right? Like, because they get annoyed when you're going in and almost not acknowledging that that's a lot of labor for them to do. And so they don't want to explain to you whatever. But if you say, I need X, Y, and Z, let me know your rates for helping with that, and then just move on to the next thing. So you'll be in their good books if you do that. Yeah, that's number one. The second thing I always say is just be short overall. You can give them more information once you get there, like once you kind of hook in and are connected, but I would keep your first message to any supplier to like 5 sentences. Like, just get the basics. This is what I'm trying to make. Can you do it? Give them a few reasons why you're all set up and good to go, and then let them right back to you.
I love that you just said this, because this is something that I see happen all the time with so many of the brands that we've helped, is when they approach a factory, they just the ignorance is obvious, first of all. I don't mean it in a negative way, but when you don't know what you're doing, the factory immediately doesn't want to respond, because it's so much labor to explain to somebody or to justify their prices, or, and if you're not organized, just to be able to find the information that they need, or just to see, hey, if I have a tech pack or whatever, just to be able to see it, and all of that is the thing that immediately you get no response because of it. So we try to focus on helping you get everything organized and everything in a format so that you can communicate really, really easily with the people that you want to hire to do the job. Whether it's somebody at Fabric or it's somebody, that Nearshore can help you find, nobody will want to work with you unless it's easy for them. You've provided what they need to be able to work with you. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I have like a template. I might look at it before we finish. I have like an email template that you can use to communicate, and it's super helpful. So I'll try to pop it in the chat before we finish. So yeah, be short. Show them you are together, and then this is the time that any sort of like name dropping, flex a little bit. Again, one sentence, like, if you have any experience, you've sold before in a store, I don't care if it's like another company, like just anything that gives you some sort of credibility, or you did some sort of fundraising, I don't know, just anything. Maybe you sold through your first collection, you sold 50 pieces or 100 pieces. That's actually an impressive feat. So that's an optional one that you can add in. That's not a must. The other ones are musts, but that can help you get a reply. The problem is, and this is really important, when you're emailing different factories, the places that will reply to the newbies are the ones that, I don't want to say they prey on it, but their whole business model is centered around helping people who don't know what they're doing, right? That's how they make their money. And it's helpful. They like, it's a very helpful thing. But if that's the only ones you're getting responses from, they're more expensive. They're more expensive to produce because they're like, they're just wrapping a whole bunch up in that. So you really want to go directly to factories or like hire more professional factories, and they tend to be really judicious with who they reply to.
And again, it's just a waste of their time if they have a bunch of other people that are providing them with what they need, and they're not new, and it's obvious they're not new, that those are the people they're going to respond to, first, because it is so much labor to respond. And they get probably so many inquiries from so many small brands that are new. So that's why that's so important. Okay, so my next question. Sure. Go ahead.
I'm just going to put the template in the chat. This is for something that's not apparel. But you can just see how brief I keep it. Okay, so you can just see how brief, and you can use something similar. We always say on the first message, all you need to get is Are they capable and are they interested? Those are the two things: capable, interested. Everything else you can figure out later once you establish contact, but otherwise it's a waste of time. You don't need, if they're not capable or interested in working with you, doesn't matter what anything else is, right? So, so use those two criteria first and figure that out. And then you can ask them, what's your minimum? How do I send samples? All the other questions. So that will help you out and save you time too.
And that's important because what they're capable of making is different depending on who you're talking to. Every factory has the machines to do specific things. And so not every factory can make everything that you might even offer in your clothing brand. So if you're making jeans, you're going to a jean factory. If you're making bathing suits, you're going to a bathing suit factory. You got to make sure that they can even make what you're asking them to make. So that's a really good point. So what kind of strategic mindset should fashion brands have right now when it comes to manufacturing?
Well, I think it ties into just what we said about negotiating. So factories in countries where there's kind of tariff benefits, right, the US being one, are eager to kind of take some of the business from factories in countries where there's tariff anxiety, right? They kind of see an opening, an opportunity. So you are the buyer, and that means you have leverage because lots of people want you. Lots of people are kind of trying to do a grab for those orders. So going in with that mindset is helpful, right? When you're negotiating. If anyone on this call is already producing in China or somewhere else, what we've seen be helpful is asking them to cover some of the tariff costs, right? I know there's the pause now and everything, but as it comes up, asking them to help you split the cost of any unexpected rise in prices. Are doing that, so you certainly have that leverage as well. So the number one thing is remembering that you have the leverage. The second thing I think is whenever there's mix-ups, right? It's kind of like during COVID, a lot of people reevaluated their life, right? They moved, they changed relationships, they changed jobs, right? And when you have things like this kind of tariff crisis, it is a bit of a shakeup, and it lets people rethink what they might do. So you might not before have thought about like, oh, maybe I'll do my sewing in Peru, I don't know, pick somewhere, but now you might be. And so taking kind of that mindset of like being open and flexible and exploring, I think is a really nice timing for that.
Yeah, good point. We're all about pivoting now. We all have experience in that at this point. Okay, so my next question is, what are some of the tangible benefits of nearshoring?
Okay, so the obvious ones, like you know that you have shorter lead times, right? Coming from China, it could take 8, 10, 12 weeks on a boat more, so a lot of things from Latin America are shipped by air. It's a very mountainous region. So they'll go either by truck or by air, and they get to the US pretty fast, especially somewhere like Mexico or Central America. So fast shipping is number one. The second is a bit more of a focus on kind of sustainability, ethical practices in factories tend to be a bit more prevalent in those regions. And so for those of you who care about that kind of thing, that can be helpful. There's also a big focus on natural fibers, right? You think about places like I just mentioned, Peru. If you are producing any sort of like organic fabrics, knitwear, things like that, it's a really nice hub for doing that kind of thing in nearshoring countries. So that can be helpful. Obviously, you have tariff burdens that are lessened. And you also have really like an ease of going to your factory that is a little more difficult, right? When you are producing something in a country that it takes you 12 hours to get there or more, right? Like if you're making something in Mexico, it is not out of the question that you might hop down from where you are on a few hour flight and go to the factory. And in that same vein, because it's so easy to travel, you have what we call time zone advantage in communication. So when I first started producing in China, I would have to set my alarm when we were going through production at 1 a.m. in order to not miss anything that was happening in the factory. That was really not fun. You don't have to do that, right? If you're producing in the US or this side of the world. So time zone advantage helps with when you actually start producing and growing, but also just communicating. When you are communicating on that time delay, everything kind of takes twice as long, because by the time their workday ends and you're giving an answer to the thing they needed to solve, it needs to be solved the next day, right? So it really can elongate the sampling and development and just production process as a whole. So that can be really helpful when you're nearshored.
That makes a lot of sense. And kind of along those lines, how do you figure out what country is the best to manufacture the specific product that you're trying to produce in? Like, what's the difference in producing in this country versus.
There are differences just because manufacturing hubs tend to pop up in different places, right? There's like specialized knowledge and then there's more of it. And sometimes it's through like the resources that are available. Sometimes it's just because of some technological advancement or an investment by the government, whatever it is. So like you might have jewelry in the Dominican Republic, you might have knitwear in Peru, you like shapewear, activewear in Colombia, swimwear, Brazil, Colombia, huge, so you do have those specialized areas. Some of them are just a bit intuitive. You can like ask ChatGPT, like, where is this item made? The other thing is look at your competition, someone a little further down the line, look where they're producing, right? You can look on the label and the tags. If they make a similar item to yours, keep an eye out for that because the larger brands tend to operate in the hubs. You'll also, if you come on Nearshore and put in a keyword, you're going to kind of see where the factories are concentrated. It's going to become like if you put in shapewear on our site, they're all going to be in Colombia, pretty much, right? And Brazil. So that will kind of become apparent as you go.
Oh, that's so convenient. I love it. All right, my next question is, it's basically coming from the experience that I had trying to manufacture in Los Angeles. I had my own brand in the 90s. And what I did was I actually pieced out each thing at different contractors. I would go to pattern maker and then I would source my materials from like the LA Textile Show. And then I would hire a grading company to grade my pattern into different sizes and to create a marker. And then I would go to a cutting service just to do my cuts. And then I would take my cuts to different sewing factories around Los Angeles. And one of the things that I noticed was that there was always something that I needed, that I found was wrong throughout the process. Like one time, something was wrong with my marker. Some of the pieces were upside down. It was supposed to be a one-way only marker where all of the pieces were in one direction because it was a fabric with a nap. It was corduroy, which has a direction to it. And some of the pieces were upside down. And so, if you don't catch stuff like that, then they're going to cut everything upside down, right? Like some of the pieces are going to be upside down, then it's going to look dark and light. And that's just one example of things that I had caught along the way. And sometimes I didn't catch things along the way. And then, you're still paying for the people to cut and to sew if the marker's wrong. And you're out all that money for the fabric and everything. So to me, QC is the number one skill that I needed when I was doing this. And besides production management, being able to know where to go and how to communicate and fill out cutting tickets and sewing contracts, but being able to check that somebody did the thing right before I went to the next step. So when you are a little like hands off and you're working in another country and you're relying on them to do everything for you, and the product gets shipped, you're just hoping that it all came out okay, because I'm assuming you're paying for it before it gets here. How do you actually get involved in the QC part with a factory that's overseas or somewhere where you can't go? Is there a way that you can actually like video chat with them at each step? Are they going to be annoyed by that? Or how can you engage with that so that you can ensure that everything comes out okay if you're a small brand?
A big important question. So first of all, when you get your sample, right, your sample is like your contract. It's like a paper contract. So when you get your perfect sample, you want to photograph it. We have people put their perfect sample like in their invoice, like a picture of it. You can do things like that just so we're setting the foundation or setting the standard here with the factory that this is what we agreed on, right? Like we both understand this is what we agreed on. So that will just help you when issues arise. So I always advise that people do that. The next thing is that you don't put a deposit on that order until your sample's correct, right? You pay for your samples separately. So factories will often try to get you to kind of wrap it all together. Even if it's more expensive, like you pay for the sample separately, because a lot of what you just talked about, some of those mistakes, those hiccups, they'll come up in sampling. And you'll either catch them during sampling and it'll be something you work out and you agree on with the factory and you talk through, or the factory will kind of misbehave and the sampling is such a disaster that you pull out and you've lost the money on the samples, but you've really protected yourself in the bigger picture. So I'm giving you kind of the incremental steps because QC is never just about the end step. It's if we do all these previous steps correctly, then it will really help things. So getting that sample right and paying for it independently is number 2. Then you're ready to go place your order, okay? So then your series of QC checks starts. So the first one should be you check over the materials. If you're getting materials shipped to the factory, you ask them to send you a few pictures, or you do a quick video call. No, they will not be annoyed. When you put in your purchase order or put in your invoice, just let them know. Again, short lines. You don't over explain. You just say like, hey, we're going to do a few video or photo checks at these junctures, 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. Just have them know that up front. It won't be an issue. So you check over your materials to make sure, I don't know, they're not stained, the wrong thing didn't come, who knows what might happen. Okay, so you do that. Then when you're about to start production, you do not pay more than 50% of you never pay it all up front, right? You put a deposit down. So we're protecting you at every kind of step, and we're minimizing your risk of loss. You might still lose, like you can't ever totally get rid of your risk of loss, but you can minimize it. So you pay 50% up front. And then what you do at that juncture, once they've produced everything, right, before you pay the remaining 50%, and certainly before it ships and you pay for all that shipping, is you get more eyes on the product. So, worst case is they send photos and you do a video. Now they can kind of hide things with that. Factories are not that bad typically, right? The horror stories are rarer, but it's not as thorough as we might like, but it's certainly better than nothing, and you can get a solid sense. So that's option number 1. And you can decide, I'm going to give you a few options. You can decide based on your experience with the factory thus far, which is the most appropriate one. Sometimes things have just gone so well. Your friend used them, that things went well for your friend. Like you have a little bit of higher confidence. Other times you're already on thin ice. The factory's on thin ice, so you really want to just go all the way. So the second option is you take a little extra time. It's going to cost you $100 or more. You have them mail you a random sample, and you make them promise that, like, pull a random sample off the line, mail it to me, and then you inspect it in person, again, before you ship. If you find something drastically wrong, correcting everything, we'll talk about that in a minute because it's already been made, but at least you have prevented yourself from not paying that remaining 50% and not shipping. So mailing a random sample is one. And then the third and best option is you get someone in the factory. So if you are producing in the US, going to the factory at the time of your first production run and looking everything over, if it's a couple $100 ticket, I think it's worth it. You don't have to do it forever. Some people go in and out same day, like just take an early flight, check everything over in the afternoon, leave at night. It's going to be a grueling day, but like you won't regret doing that. And you also get some face time with the factory. So you can do that. You can also hire people. So let's say you're producing outside of Boston or in LA, like you could find people on Fiverr or somewhere to go for like $20 an hour, give them instructions. Like if you really need to, like you can do that, right? A lot of people just don't ever do this stuff, and that's why they have issues. And then there are professional quality control agencies that will also go to your factory and do it for you. Would you use one of those on like a 50 or 100 piece order? Probably not. Usually we say the second your order gets over between $5,000 and $10,000, you should use a QC person. They might be a couple $100. So we're not talking about a huge cost. So they go in and they really are professional. They give you a whole report. They take pictures. They give you more information than you want to know. So those are your options. Once those hoops have been jumped through, then you pay your balance payment. You have a high degree of confidence in the order being shipped to you, and it comes to you, and hopefully we're all happy.
Yay. Oh, I'm so glad that you agree with all of this. And those of you who are apparel entrepreneur members, in your roadmap, there's a QC checkpoint after every single step. It says what you're supposed to look for, what you're supposed to ask about. So, when you're looking at when you're getting your pattern made, you need to look at it. When you're getting your pattern graded, you need to look at the grade. When you get the marker made, you need to look at the marker. When you deliver your fabrics, you need to put your eyes on your fabrics, make sure, like she said, they're not damaged. It's the right quantity. It's the right fabric. Everything and the cuts, like, are they all there? Is and the sewing before it's sewn. Usually if it's domestic, you can go in there and you can actually take some measurements. You could do a little bit of rough specking real quick before the whole thing is put together. Like, are these shoulders coming out the same spec as the sample is, and all of those things. So if you're like, oh, I don't even know what questions to ask, use your roadmap. Those QC checks are in there at every single one of those steps for that reason, so that you know what to ask. Okay, so I have another kind of question along those lines. So the fact that, a lot of the brands that we work with are small brands like when I was manufacturing in Los Angeles, they're very hands-on and they have to use the roadmap and go through, each step so that they, they're doing small batches. So they're usually domestically contracting out separate places. And they also want to own their IP. They want to own their pattern so that they can replicate it someplace else and not start from scratch. They want to own the information about where their materials and their trims came from, because they want to be able to make sure, again, to replicate the product exactly with the same fabrics and the same trims, no matter where, if they diversify their factories or if they grow or if something happens to their factory or whatever. So if they have sourced their own materials and trims and have had their patterns graded, can they still work with Nearshore and basically send all of that to the factories that they work with?
Yeah, you'll be very popular if you do that. So factories in the United States, but also in Latin America, really prefer that you have all your materials sourced. It's very different than going to Asia, where you kind of put in a request and all of it magically appears. That does not happen here because it's labor, time consuming to source stuff. So absolutely, you can use your own materials. The other benefit to that is if you've already sourced materials, if you are kind of switching up your supply chain, let's say you want to go to a different country, Mexico or somewhere like that, you already have everything spec'd. You can send those materials to the factory and say, hey, can you help me find something similar? And it's much easier for them to do than you just kind of vaguely trying to describe what you want.
Yes, very true. Okay, that's great news. But let's just say somebody does want to rely on one of those factories to do the sourcing for them. Is that also an option?
It is. I always tell people when you're thinking about your supply chain and everything you need, to start with the end in mind. Okay, so you always start with the factory. Find first the factory who's going to sew it up, make that item. Okay, find out if they have existing sources. Some of them have. They right away can be like, oh, talk to Jay, he's the best one for this kind of stuff. They'll just give you a connection, right? So that's kind of a free, easy win for you. Sometimes they will offer sourcing as a service. Angela, I probably see sourcing as a service for anywhere between $50 and it goes up to $200 an hour. It can be very expensive. But some will offer that, so you can find that out, and it might be something you choose to do just to save yourself some time. So that's option number 2. And the third option is they can't help you, or it's too expensive, you don't want to, and then you have to source it yourself. You can use Nearshore, you can use our platform to put on RFQs for any material, button, zipper, I don't know, whatever it is you want to find. So you can source it yourself. Trims, trims are pretty easy to find yourself. Fabric a little harder, but it's doable.
Yeah, and we've got a free sourcing library here at Fabric. So if you live in Arizona, come into the library, you can touch all the fabrics, you can see who the wholesalers are. And then we've also got them in your roadmap too. So if you're looking for certain things, we've already got you a good head start on where to find all the things that you need. If you did rely on that factory, Liz, to do the sourcing for you, would they tell you where they got your fabric? Or I feel like maybe they wouldn't, because that's sort of a way to ensure that you're going to continue to work with them. And I understand that, but I'm not sure what your experience is with that.
Okay, I have a different, so I will not have someone have a factory source if they won't give them the sources, unless
Good.
It's we really need it, there's some extenuating circumstance, you have some rush deadline, whatever. Because why? Then it's annoying for you. It's a short-term win. It means they're marking it up. That's why they're doing it. Otherwise, there's not really a reason for them not to tell you. So you're paying more. It's just annoying. It's better to just pay them a sourcing fee and have the contact yourself. Yeah, so I don't really like factories to do that.
I'm glad you think that, because that's how I feel too. But sometimes it's the easy button for people. They just want the easy solution, and it's worth it.
Sometimes what you do on your first order is you might just take the easy route, because your first order really is not about making money. It's about testing the market. Can I sell these? And so if you do want to take the easy route on your first order, that's a little bit of a different, you just have to know going in, you do it in a clear-eyed way.
Right. Kind of along the same lines, what about patterns? If you relied on some full service, vertically integrated factory to do your development, will they give you your patterns?
upfront wouldn't work with someone, I don't think, who wouldn't give me the patterns because it's expensive. Development is expensive. And so for you to do all the different patterns and the grading and everything for different styles in your line, like you don't want to have to do that again. It's annoying. No one's ever going to get it just the same. I don't know. I would be a no to that.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I've met a lot of people who've come to Fabric because they're frustrated at working with some factories, you know, in other countries that like just won't share the IP with them, and now they're starting from scratch. They have nothing, you know, after years of going through all of this, and I just can't believe it, and it's so frustrating, and I feel bad for that experience.
Yeah, that's something you should ask up front, especially now since everything is available in digital form. It's like,
yeah, send us the pattern. Yes. Okay, good. Yay. And then this is just the last question I have before we're going to open it up to everybody else. Just in general, if anybody is wanting to do this and to start using Nearshore, coming through Fabric as a partner is giving them some benefits, right?
Absolutely. So, well, first of all, the informal benefit that's not advertised is, like I mentioned before, if you send me your RFQ, I might be able to make some intros. We certainly don't do that for everyone. So, so that's number one. Number two, you get 10% off if you do a paid plan. So we have a free option that, again, I'll give all of you free accounts for that, and I'll show you how it works, just like 30-second overview. But you can come on, put on an RFQ, and I'll kind of show you what happens when you do that. If you do a paid option, it is, even if you just do it for 1 month, 2 months, very worthwhile because you get to actually access the search database. And that means you can like keyword search, look for suppliers, browse factory profiles. It's really nice. You also get kind of priority inclusion in our RFQ center. So actually, Angela, let me just really quickly do the screen share and I'll show what this looks like. So when you come on with a free account, right? So you're going to see something like this. You're going to go, so this is your dashboard, all the different like things you can do. You're going to go to RFQs. This is what you'll care about most with a free account. And you're going to go to new request. So an RFQ, it doesn't need to scare you. We get questions all the time in our customer service inbox, like, I don't know how to create one. What is it? It's like, it's just a request for quote. We've made a really simple form to kind of collect what it is you're looking for. And you just have to fill out the form. So you want to create an RFQ for each individual thing you're sourcing. So if you're looking for a sewing factory to make your dresses, right, you'd want to put that in here, like you could just do dresses, but you want to make it clear that that's what you're looking for. I would do a separate RFQ if you're looking for like, you know, YKK zippers or button, whatever, you know, you have all your particular things. I would do a separate one for each. You'll get more traction because suppliers will see them. But so you just go down, you fill all of this out. Again, we've made it so simple. You want to upload some sort of image or tech pack. You know, put some visual reference there, the more the better. And then we have kind of this fun section where you can say, you know, like I'm interested in these locations, but I'm flexible or I'm not flexible. We have certifications. We also have some fun, where is it? Oh, supplier qualities is a fun one, right? If you're looking for like low minimum order, startup friendly, woman owned, like anything that you care about here, you can also say it's a must have or it's a, you know, a nice to have. And then you just hit submit. And so what happens after you do that is you can't see it because it's on the factory side of things. But the factories have what they see as a project center, an introduction center. So they're looking at all the different projects that are coming in and they're hitting request introduction, okay? I'm gonna stop sharing now because that's kind of what you needed to see. So they are hitting request introduction and then you are getting a message and it is saying, do you want to talk to this factory? And you can say accept or decline. And so it gives you control of who you want to talk to and it lets the factories kind of come to you, which is really nice. On the free plan, so this is why you should upgrade as a Fabric member. On the free plan, you get one of those a month. So you kind of drip your contacts. One is better than nothing. You should absolutely come in. We've had some people get one and that's who they work with and it works for them. So it's certainly still valuable. But if you have the upgraded plan, you get multiple introductions. So you can talk to a whole bunch of factories. You also can submit multiple RFQs. So that's how that works. You also don't just want to sit back though and rely on the factories to contact you. I was in there earlier today, it was like 60 pages of projects with like a lot of projects on each page, right? So for factories to be sorting through that, we're trying to catch them up. There's a lot has happened. So do you want to just rely on them reaching out to you? No. You also want to use the factory search where you go in, it looks like almost like an Airbnb. You're going in, you're putting in dresses, whatever it is, trench coat, whatever it is you're looking for. And you're proactively just messaging suppliers that way as well. And that's when you're doing kind of your little pitch. We allow you, like once you message suppliers, you can take it off platform. You can exchange email, Zoom, whatever it is you want. You just have to agree to the platform terms, but you can communicate like in whatever way is comfortable for you. So that's kind of how it works structurally.
Wow, that's great. It's so easy. I love it.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, so is there anything that you want to share before I open this up into Q&A? Is there anything we didn't cover?
No, I think something might come to me during the Q&A and I'll share, but I think we did a good job.
Okay, good. All right, so now we just want to open it up for any questions that you guys might have. Just put your hand up like we did before in the beginning of the call today, and then I'll call on you and you can unmute yourself. All right, Brendan.
Thanks, Angela.
Yeah.
Liz, great to speak with you again. I think we spoke a couple of times on that sourcing call that you had for Nearshore a few weeks ago. As Angela knows, I've got a pretty unique set of challenges that our manufacturing is presenting. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the golf industry, but my average order size is looking like it's going to be ranging somewhere from 50 to 250 to 300 units on average. These caddy programs can range pretty drastically depending on, sometimes you have multiple courses at a resort that are all under the same branding, all under the same umbrella. Sometimes you've got 40 guys at an independent course somewhere that are looking for the same quality of garment that they can leverage though. So I had an interesting conversation with another entrepreneur this evening before we got on this call. And he's actually working on developing a sewn good that is more geared towards medical device. He's actually required to go out and get a 510K now and go through that whole process. But one of the interesting things that came out of that conversation was he mentioned something about it's a technology that I'm not familiar with. I haven't heard the term before, and maybe you guys can enlighten me, but called digital knitting. And the basic premise was that it's like 3D printing for sewn goods. And he's convinced, he actually mentioned a factory out of North Carolina called Bosong, and I looked on Nearshore and it is on there.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a machine by a company called Stoll that does this digital knitting. And he was highly confident. We're going to have a conversation next week to discuss things further, but he was highly confident that this is something that he's willing to make the introduction, and he thinks that this could reduce the cost of the sewing by multiple times, meaning, if right now I'm being quoted somewhere between, and it could be anywhere from $50 to $85 just in labor costs, which is a huge expense to me. But he believes we could get it sub $20 here in the States with less human involvement. Is that something, the question I'm getting at here is, it's fantastic to have the location and the certifications, and maybe I haven't looked through the filter capabilities enough, but is there a way to filter by service and technology? So for instance, using fabric as an example, let's say fabric were on Nearshore. I know that they're going through their changes as well, but just using them as a historical example, if they were on this platform and they wanted to highlight that they have this direct to garment Corny Presto Max printer that can do, an entire spectrum of organic material prints, and wanted to highlight this. I know that you can show the direct to garment, but is there a way to show the actual technology that's being utilized, whether that's a Stoll or Shima or any other digital knitting technology. So I'll leave it there, and any information you can give to me on that would be fantastic as I kind of go into these conversations, both next week as well as I've got 6 factories through Nearshore that I'm actively speaking to. They're waiting on me to give them the latest sample, and they also want to either review, if not deconstruct, a physical sample. So that'll probably take place at the size run. But anyway, we're in this kind of due diligence process right now. So I feel like I'm at a critical junction point right now, which is, do I go the traditional cut and sew route, or is there something here that I really need to be looking into and understand the due diligence behind what, not I'm sorry, it's getting pretty late here, but just understanding the economics behind it and what the actual technology is. I feel very uneducated in that area now. So any information at all that you can provide to me would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think the 3D knitting is interesting. You'll have to price it out. There's nothing can take away the research phase, unfortunately. So for you to be educated about it, you really are going to have to price it out with a couple places. I just put in, as you were talking, a search for 3D knitting on the platform. There's like a whole bunch of options. In terms of what particular equipment they have, we are actually adding the ability for supplier profiles to showcase different machines and equipment. Whenever you're doing a search, and this is on Nearshore, but on any platform, you want to start kind of big and then whittle it down, or you can go in the reverse order, but make sure you do both. So you'd start out with something like 3D knitting. Think of you use the word digital knitting. Think of different ways that suppliers would describe what they do. Do those search terms one by one, see what comes up. And then you can get as particular as a particular equipment, that they would have. But I would come at the keywords from those angles. And then from there, it's really just, quoting and sampling. So we typically say to understand the landscape, you need between 3 and 5 prices. I'd say for something like this, you could get away with 2 or 3 and compare that to 2 or 3 sewn goods prices. And then you'd kind of understand what you're working with.
Excellent.
Brendan,
Thank you, Liz.
Brendan, you and I should talk about that later too, because I don't think your product it would work with digital knitting for a reason. So, but we'll talk about that.
I don't think it would either, based on the little bit that I've been able to research in the last 2 hours between that conversation that I had in this conference call. But
I like the idea
still,
of being able to search equipment.
Yeah, but I think that this really ties into our very first conversation, that before you go down any rabbit holes of thinking about price, of thinking about anything, what do we say we're checking for? Capability and interest. So when you're talking to those suppliers, if they have a quick picture of your product, they'll know, they'll typically understand if it's something that they're capable of knitting in that way. So that you can spend a lot of time imagining scenarios that aren't, it's better to just do that with the suppliers first before you do anything else.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it, ladies. And I just will say that I'm not sure how familiar he is with the garment construction side of the business. He is working, I think, exclusively with knit fabrics, specifically with Lycra. So, it might be that the combination of the woven and the knits that we're using, and also just the sheer complexity of what we're developing, seems to me, just at face value, to be not possible to do with something like digital knitting. Just kind of like I'm extrapolating out from what 3D printing can do right now. It can do a lot of things, but there are still some limitations to it at the moment. But I will certainly heed your advice and try to find, in addition to Bosong, if there's any other factories that are on the platform that do offer digital knitting. Fantastic. Otherwise, I'm just going to take your advice. I'm going to search using those keywords, try to find 2 or 3 other factories, have a conversation with them, proactively reach out and see if I can get some quotes all before any of these decisions have to be made.
Awesome.
Great. That's a great plan.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to go now to Reg.
Hi there, this is Regina. I provide mobile sewing lessons in Tucson. I wanted to ask a question about how your company uses AI. I see that it sounds like your company uses AI for searching. So I wanted to understand more how that's integrated and what your company is doing to reduce the ecological impact of the use of AI.
So our AI is not, it's simple in that it's just trying to match you with the best suppliers, right? So you're putting in data into your RFQ, into your sourcing request form, and then we're comparing that to data that suppliers have given about their capabilities at their factory, and really using algorithms to figure out what the best match is, so that it's, you know, saving both sides, right? Factories don't want to have wasted conversations, and neither do brands. So that's really the purpose of what we're doing. Right now, we use a lot of human matching, right? As the system grows, we're not entirely using AI, and that will kind of change as we grow and the algorithm becomes more sophisticated.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Elijah, you have your hand up?
Yeah. Oh, I just want to ask a quick question. Do you guys have manufacturers and suppliers that work with undergarments? Because I feel like that's hard. A lot of it's like t-shirt or jeans, like it's all the other clothing, but it seems like with the undergarments, the bras and the panties, I know it's a different ball game. So I just want to know if there's some on that platform.
So, yes, you could do that two ways, and this goes for anyone searching anything. You could put in a keyword like bra, underwear, shapewear, whatever it is. You could also, we have an intimate product category, so you could just click that and then look at all the different suppliers in that category.
Okay, thank you.
Yay, Elijah, this is going to be great for you. All right, David.
Hey, Angela, thank you. My question is, I'm trying to do motorcycle saddlebags, which rather than just doing the standard all leather or all fabric, we're trying to do a mix with a ABS back. And I've been directed for samples to try to have it 3D printed. I found you guys through Phoenix Forge, which I looked at to print the back, only we're at the very limit of their capability. And I've talked to some ABS injection mold places that can do samples, but they have extremely long lead times and they're looking for a commitment that's sort of greater than the level I'm at. So is that something that there's a database for?
Yeah, I have a good supplier for you, I think. So when you create your account afterward, just send me a message, and I can send it to you that way.
Awesome.
Yay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, how about Latoya?
Hello. First, thank you. This has been extremely helpful. I have a question about plus size manufacturers. One of the things that I struggle with, I know it all boils down to the pattern and making sure that all of that is together, but sometimes I do encounter, and I make a lot of my stuff, so I usually make the sample because I'm the sample size, but one of the things that I encounter is even when sending the correct measurements or the correct pattern, they still struggle with the intricate details of plus size, right? So do you have manufacturers that I don't necessarily need to cater to, but are familiar with the plus size form?
Yeah, so I just put in plus size. I'm seeing a whole bunch. So this kind of question, when it's good because you want to work with suppliers who have produced your type of product before. So it is okay for you to want that. You should actually, that kind of should be a requirement. Because you're in sewn goods, there's a lot of factories that do sewing. So you can also, you're not really limited in your options. So you can kind of pare down your supplier options by going out and asking, you know, are they capable and interested? And then from there, I would say, have you worked on any plus size lines? And suppliers who say yes are going to go to maybe the top of your queue. You can do a plus size search on our site and you'll get ones that have mentioned it in their description for some reason, right? They've tagged themselves for a reason with that.
Okay.
You know, I want to weigh in on this. So if you develop your own patterns or with a pattern maker, and then that pattern maker grades your pattern into your sizes according to your specs, according to your patterns, your size chart, your grade rules. Then those are patterns that they're already shapes in those sizes, and technically they shouldn't change. I mean, if it's already created, like let's say you have size 26 and it's already a pattern, it's that piece, that's your cookie cutter. So I mean, am I not understanding, like, what's happening when you send your patterns that are graded to a factory? What's coming out wrong? Are they just ignoring your patterns?
I don't know if they're ignoring the patterns, but when I get it back, it seems like when I try them on, it could be a little bit tight in one special spot, or it just seems like it's not fitting like it initially fit when I was doing it. So I don't know. I don't know. It could be me, but I don't know. That's what I encounter. And I haven't dealt with anyone where I had to send them the physical patterns. I just send them the information and then okay, we got it. And they'll go run and do it. And then they'll come back and send it to me. And I'm like, this is not what I asked you for. So
what you want to do is you want to actually, first of all, once you've perfected your pattern, that's your block, that's your main pattern. That's the one that you're then grading from. And then once that pattern is graded, it's good to do a size run, like to have one sewn of each to test the grade, because you never know if, the pattern got wonky as it grew in different direction, in between different sizes. And it's the best way to tell if it's grading properly for your company's body type, because there are so many different plus size bodies, just like there's so many different non-plus size bodies. Right? Is it hourglass? Is it wedge? Is it pear shape? Is it, and so it's up to your brand on what you want it to do, and testing it. It's more expensive to sew a size set of each one. So sometimes a small brand can't afford to do that, and they just hope for the best and just, cross their fingers that the sizes are going to come out okay. But, it's best to actually sew one of each. And technically you can do that, with a sample maker, with the pattern maker grading it and then sewing up one of each to test it, and then perfect the patterns before you send it, to a factory, so that you can make sure that, because then they're just going to sew up your pattern. And if you're happy with it, then you'll get better results.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Astrid.
Thank you so much. So, Liz, I just have to say, really nice to meet you. Thank you so much for all the solid advice tonight and for sharing best practices, from communicating with factories to negotiating and developing a product. It's all, closer to home. I think it's all really cool. I'll start off kind of with this, and as I've been trying to discover more of those sustainable fashion brands myself, this bracelet right here, the Make-A-Wish collection by Lokai. So Lokai, and I'm looking here at their website to reference it. It holds water from Mount Everest and mud from the Dead Sea, the highest and lowest points on Earth, which I thought was pretty cool. They have a bunch of, colors and designs, and you can support, various nonprofits. Super cool. And, the pants that I'm wearing are Porta-Bra. So a brand that I, more recently discovered. And what I, discovered from the brand itself is that the fabric, this is the first, and I'm referencing it here as well. It is the first sustainable, let's see here. The first ever polyamide, help me out with the pronunciation, polyamide. That's, eco-friendly, and, it's supposed to be good for your skin. It's the first biodegradable fiber, a polyamide in the world. So how do you, kind of become like this, driver in, developing something that is good for your skin, good for the world, something along those lines. That's like, okay, it doesn't exist. How do we, work with those stakeholders to bring something like that to life?
I mean, I think I'm curious how you would answer this, Angela, but I think if you're open in terms of what you will make or do. It can be really fun to go to some of the eco-friendly fabric and kind of innovative fabric suppliers and ask them for material swatches and work backwards. Like, what can I make from this? This is a really cool material. What can I do with it? We have, you know, a mix on the platform of like eco-friendly suppliers that have lots of different fabrics that are kind of in the eco umbrella. And we also have like innovators who have just made one material. What was I looking at the other day? It was like, oh, fish leather. I thought that was great. You know, fish skin leather. They've like developed and created a technology to produce one singular material. They might have some variety, but that's what they've done. So you have both of those options on the platform. Biomaterials is a very cool emerging field. So, but yeah, I would get samples and then be creative.
You know what? That's how I would answer it too, Liz. Like I used to go to the textile show, even though I knew who all the vendors were, and I technically didn't need to see their new stuff because they carried the same stuff year after year and just added new fashion colors or whatever. But I would go to see what the new innovation was, like what's the cool new textile. And now there's so many because, you know, technology is just making it, and sustainability is just making people come up with the coolest stuff. So that is exactly what I would do too. What Liz says, just go learn about what exists and then what can you make out of it. You know, locally, there is this woman who created this textile that is heat resistant. And it's like, when it's like, let's say you make a hat out of it, it literally makes you cooler under the hat. Like it takes the temperature down by a significant amount. Like it's the same technology that NASA uses in the nose cone of the space shuttle. And she worked with NASA to create this. And we have swatches of it in the library. So there's like some cool stuff that is even happening right in Arizona. I mean, and you know, maybe something like that would spark something, you know, for you to come up with something creative and cool. I love that. Oh, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. So text me or email me and I'll send it to you. It's actually in the library, like right on the cabinet. Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions? Did we get through everybody's questions? I have one more, Liz. Did you guys already give your grant away or is that still going on?
Okay, so listen, you can still submit with the link, I believe. It technically closed last night, but we had a few people who didn't get in their RFQ. So I believe it's still open. You can test it. If you just Google Get Nearshored Grant, so Nearshored with a D, our company's Nearshore, but the brand is called Get Nearshored. It will come up. It's like first on Google. Try applying. It doesn't hurt. We announced the winners in early June. So it's $5,000. You can use it to produce anything you want as long as it's in a nearshored country.
That's so
We're giving away
exciting.
3 of them. So it's not just one. Yeah.
Have you had like a lot of people apply?
A lot.
I bet. I bet. That's awesome that you guys are doing that. Thank you for doing that and helping the
And by
apparel.
the way, yeah, keep an eye because we'll keep doing it, right? This will be, I don't know, biannual or annual, but it will be recurring. So keep an eye.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we'll keep sharing it in our newsletter and everything for you guys that are.
Yeah, we want it to be like a lot, you know, we want it to be like a standing grant that people know exists. And I think we'll do it twice a year. Actually, that is what we decided, now that I'm remembering. So the next one, the next draw will be something like November, something like that. Yeah, but it will be there.
That's awesome. There were a couple of questions or comments that were in the comment section. I just want to make sure we didn't miss any of them. I see Tom mentioned like utilizing NFC chips. And Tom, I don't know if you're aware of Rainfall, the digital product passports that we've been using. He was actually one of our behind the scenes guests, but we're trying to encourage all of our brands to incorporate digital product passports into their clothing because it tells your story, you know, and you really need to tell your story nowadays, and for a lot of reasons, but also because, you know, your prices are going to be higher when you're making smaller batches and you need to explain why and who and show who made it, and all that transparency and everything can be really beneficial and show, you know, how the product was made. So digital product passports are actually like going to be the norm. I mean, in a couple of years, it's actually a law that's being passed where you have to have one in your, and it's going to be a QR code that's on garment tags. And it's already become the law in some European countries. So Did you have a specific, are you working within emerging fashion tech?
We have like fashion wearable suppliers, like suppliers who kind of focus on smart fashion. So they would certainly be in the know about that, and you could connect with them.
Yeah, and then if you wanted to just get the technology through Rainfall too, they're one of our partners as well. I can help you with that. Just email info@Fabric Incubator and I'll connect you. And they can be ironed on, they could be just put into the hem of something, or you can use the QR code system. But it's a whole service and it's pretty awesome. We've been using it a lot at Fabric. Love it. And also you mentioned circularity. There's another partner that we had on here for behind the scenes that was EcoStance. So it's a carbon offset. So if sustainability is something that you're, hopefully embracing, and everybody should be, then you can become a carbon neutral brand when you work with Fabric, and I'll connect you to them too. So I'm glad you asked those questions. Were there any other questions in the chat that we missed? I don't think so. I'm just looking really quick just to make sure, but I think we got them. All right, last chance. Anything else? Anybody? Okay. Oh, Astrid, yes.
Liz, so after you sign up for the premium account on Nearshore, and I might not be referencing it correctly, and I don't have it pulled up on the other window here. It's for 6 months, those $19 if you do kind of that first level.
I just told them this was confusing. You don't have to stay for 6 months.
Okay.
You get that discounted price for up to 6 months, but you can just come for a month if you want.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Awesome. Good question. Okay, well, this is really late for Liz, so I want to thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate your expertise and taking the time, especially this late. And you're amazing. I'm so glad that we partnered with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet all of you. I really enjoyed it. And we do these Q&As once a month. Our next one is next Wednesday. So if you create your free Nearshore account, you'll see it on the dashboard that you can sign up. So if you have more questions, like come once a month and hang out.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
you guys, thank you so much for always being a part of the Fabric family. And again, you can connect with me every week at the F Fashion. It's the Friday at 4 o'clock session where we just answer questions and talk kind of similarly. So join me at that. And if